this demo, I'm going to show you how to view networking information on a Windows computer. This is really helpful because a lot of things that cause users to have issues are related to networking, such as having the wrong IP address or IP configuration information, not having the right DNS server. These are really things that a lot of times these things can cause issues, and they're often the root of a lot of different problems. So what we're going to cover is taking a look at that information. I'll also cover how you map a network drive using PowerShell, and then we'll finish off testing a network connection. So let's jump into our demo. So on our client system, we want to take a look at the IP configuration information. So back before PowerShell, we used to use a command called ipconfig, which brought up the command.exe IP configuration information. And one of the things that oftentimes we do with ipconfig is we do a /all, and that brings us our detailed IP configuration information so we can see on our system whether or not DHCP is enabled. So we see that it is not enabled on this system, which means that we have a static IP address. We see all of our IP, our subnet default gateway, and then also our DNS information. This is one of the first places that I always look with end users whenever troubleshooting an issue. Look to make sure that the IP configuration is correct and allows them to route properly, and also look at the DNS to make sure that they can resolve DNS names properly. So if we want to do this in PowerShell, we probably want to find a command that has something to do with IP. So notice we get a lot of commands in here. So we'll scroll up here. We've got some network security, a bunch of different stuff. So I'm going to go up here, and we saw this before. Here's the two commands we're going to look at: the net IP address and the get-net IP configuration. So if we type in get-net IP address, we see that it brings a bunch of information about all of the IP addresses, interface information, some other information. This isn't as helpful for us as the IP configuration command. So if we do a get-net IP configuration, we see that it brings the IP configuration information for us, the IPv4 address, default gateway, DNS servers. So it gives us similar information that we see with the ipconfig. I tend to use ipconfig all still because it saves me some typing and it provides me some more information. So say our end user's having a problem with DNS. So let's take a look at the commands for DNS. We'll put in DNS here, and that's going to bring up a lot of functions and commands that I can use because I have the RSAT tools open. Whenever we're looking at things related to a client computer, we're always looking for DNS client. So right here, we've got 4 or 5 commands related to DNS client. So we see we've got a set-DNS client. And then if we go up here further, we see we've got some get commands for DNS client, the client cache, the DNS client server address. So these are all helpful commands. So let's take a look at each one of these. So let's do a help of get-DNS client, and we'll see that that retrieves the configuration details specific to each of the network interfaces on our computer. So if we do a get-DNS client, we see that that brings up all of the interfaces, the interface index, and it shows us if we have any specific suffixes or search lists related to us. So it gives us some information, but not really a lot of information like we get from, say, get DNS client server address. And this will bring back for us on all of the interfaces on our system the server addresses that are listed for DNS. So this is a great way to tell whether or not a client has the correct or incorrect DNS server listed on their system. Another thing we can do is say a client is trying to go out to a website and They're just not getting the right website. What we can always do is we can do a get-DNS client cache to view the client cache. And this will list all of the cached information that's cached locally for DNS on our system. So we'll see all of the entries, their names. We'll also see how long those records are going to live, the time to L. So this is a good thing to take a look at. So those are some things for working with the networking and DNS. So next, let's take a look at mapping a network drive. So we use Simple Message Block, or SMB. That's the Windows function for getting to network shares. So to find the command, I'm going to do a GCM SMB, and we'll see that brings a bunch of different SMB command functions for us. So if we take a look here, we see a number of different gets. We see SMB connection, delegation, SMB mapping. Hey, that one sounds kind of promising. So I'm going to put in help, get SMB mapping, and we're just going to go straight to the examples. So it's going to show us examples. The first one shows us here's how we get the SMB mappings, and it'll show us a list of mappings. So we'll do a get SMB mapping, and it'll show us all of the mappings. So chances are, if we need to add a mapping for a user or to a remote system, we're going to have to do a new mapping. Let's just see if there's a help for new-SMB mapping. And there is. So this one allows us to create a new server message block mapping. I'm going to do the examples for that, and it'll show us the example of how to put that in. So we put in a parameter for -local path, being the drive letter we want to set, and then the -remote path is going to be the UNC path to the share we want to connect to. So in our case, we want to create a new SMB mapping, and we want that to go out to a local path, and we're going to use the S drive. And we want that to go to a remote path on DC01 to the shares directory. See, gives us the OK status. Now if we go back up to our get SMB mapping, we see that now we have that drive letter created for us. So the last thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at how we test network connections. So one of the things we have to do for users a lot of times is when we're troubleshooting them not being able to get somewhere, we want to test to verify their network connectivity by either IP address or by a fully qualified domain name. And one tool we've used for a number of years is called ping. It sends an ICMP echo to a remote system. So I'm just going to put 4.2.2.1 in there, which is an address on the internet. And it replies back and it shows me that, oh yeah, that works well. The problem is, say if this weren't working, if it were going someplace that it timed out, I might not know along the path where that timed out. So for that, we used to use a tool called traceroute. And traceroute allowed us to map all of the hops, basically each router, as our packet goes across the network. So we can see where there's areas where we're not able to get past. So it kind of gives us an idea of where our traffic's going to. This is going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to go and show you the command that we can do a test of both the network connection using ping, similar to ping, using test.net connection. Notice it's doing a ping/ICMP echo test using PowerShell. So we see it gives us similar information back as what we got with the ping tool. And then we can also do, if we want to do a trace route, we could do a trace route for that. So if we enter that, what that's going to do is it's going to do as similar as traceroute did, and it's using PowerShell to do an ICMP echo request across all of the routers as we go to that destination. So we see there's one timed out. That might mean that there's simply a router there that isn't responding. However, it did go through and get all of the other paths. The other thing that we can do is sometimes we want to test by port. So what we can do here is we could go out, we could do a test net connection, and I can do by a common TCP port. 80 is a common port, and we'll do that against pluralsight.com. Notice that it errors out, cannot validate the argument, and it comes and tells us that that needs to be something like HTTP, RDP, SMB, or WinRM. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to simply change that to HTTP. And now it's going to go through the process. It's still going to do that ping ICMP test, but what it's also going to do is it's going to test to see if that port 80 is open. So as it went through, it showed the remote address, the remote port. Ping did not succeed because Pluralsight's probably blocking pings. However, the TCP test did succeed because they do have a website at that address. Those are some ways that we can test networking using PowerShell.